Chapter 2 of Money and Banking covers the concept of money. And my recommendation to you is to definitely read the chapter. This textbook is very easy to read. The author gives some wonderful examples. Again, it's Money and Banking, Financial Markets and Institutions by Michael Brandl. So it's, again, very easy to read, very easy to understand. So he talks first about the concept of money. And he gets into, like, imagine if we didn't have money. I mean, how could we live the way that we live right now? How could we, get our groceries, get our gas, buy a car, all that stuff if you didn't have some sort of money? So that's kind of how he introduces it. The definition of money is anything that is generally accepted in exchange for goods and services and or repayment of debt. So he picks out a couple of those key things to say, if it's generally accepted, it means that everybody is okay with it. So, as we're doing business, we know that, okay, we're okay with I'm going to give you money or my credit card, which is going to convert into money, and the seller is accepting of that. Then he gets into... it doesn't have to be dollars. It doesn't have to actually be money. It could be other things. And then there's the term called dollarization, and that is when a market participates in another country's currency as their money. And then he gives the example of a country, Bolivia. So Bolivia had their own currency. And, who knows what happened, if there was political unrest or, just a very poor economy. But the people of Bolivia decided to no longer use that currency, and they decided to use the US dollar as their form of currency. So that's what dollarization is. It doesn't have to be your local currency that you use if everybody agrees to accept something else. And then even think in the European countries, most of those countries have their own like the British pound, but then they also use the euro. So both of those would be acceptable uses of money. And then legal tender is what assets are accepted for repayment of debt. So that's a little bit different from a standpoint of, if you're borrowing money from the bank, what are you okay in paying? So they might specifically say, we expect to get paid in the US dollar. So, or maybe if they were in Bolivia, maybe the Bolivia banks would say, we expect to get paid in whatever the Bolivia dollar was. So that legal tender maybe could be different depending on the circumstances. Then we get into what the function of money is. So again, there's a definition, the medium of exchange. So that is the good that is accepted by both sides in the transaction. So again, the buyer and the seller are both okay with whatever that money is. So it becomes the medium of exchange for that transaction. And then it gets into some examples to say, back before we had dollars, we could have bartered. So maybe we'd say, okay, bushels of wheat or bars of gold or things like that. But it would have to be something, again, that the buyer and the seller both would agree upon. So say if you're saying, okay, I have bushels of wheat and I want to go buy eggs from the farmer, well, they have to want your bushels of wheat if that's what you have to pay. So then that's called the double coincidence of wants. So that's what makes bartering very hard, to say that, okay, I have something I'm willing to give up if it's not US dollars. And then the seller has something that they want to get. They might not be the same thing. So that's that coincidence of wants that the seller would have what the buyer is actually able to provide in the transaction. And then it gives you some statistical numbers of what are the chances of that? If that's what we were doing is just bartering, what would be the chances that what we had to give up is what the seller would want and would be willing to take for that? So again, it would make it a very challenging economy if that's what it was, and we did not have money to actually use. It also talks about the unit of account. So again, the agreed upon method of placing a relative value on assets, because that's the other thing. So say with your Well, at least with the bushels of wheat, you could probably weigh it and understand how much it was. But, say you had, something else that couldn't quite be quantified that way that you were willing to give up, or maybe you could perform a service. So you could sow, and you're going to try to barter your ability to sow to get food. But then how do you measure those things? How do you know how much you got to sow to equal the food that you're getting? So, that's the example of like that would make that bartering even harder, because there's no clear measure of what one thing is worth compared to what the other thing is worth. And that's where that unit of account comes in, that there's a specific amount that it is worth and it's measurable and everybody understands it. Then the other term is store of value, that the money must maintain some purchasing power over time. So again, if you're talking bushels of wheat or things that are going to decay and have, expire and not be good over a period of time, they don't really have that store of value. I mean, maybe a little bit, but not, couldn't be years. Where again, money and gold and silver and things like that do have that store of value. They can continue over time. And again, he gives you some great examples of that. So read through it. And then it does talk about how money can lose its value, and that's through inflation. And we'll talk about inflation kind of throughout this book, because it definitely impacts money. You know what I mean? And inflation just means that it's going to cost more in the future for what we could buy today. So like if I can buy a gallon of milk for $3, well, next year it might be $3.30. It's going to take more money to get that same product. Then it gets into the supply and demand of money, because that can impact the value, and that can also kind of go into the economy, to say if it can cause inflation or it can cause the economy to go down into a recession. So he says for inflation, if money increases too quickly and you have too much money chasing too few of goods, that's going to cause inflation. So the value is going to go up. Then on the other hand, if the money supply does not grow fast enough, then there'll be not enough money for transactions to take place, and then the economy can go into a recession. So again, that supply of money can either cause inflation or it can cause a recession. So it's good to understand those. Then commodity money is, the definition of that is money that has some other use than being a medium of exchange, being a unit of account, or having a store of value. So to be a commodity money, it says there's some requirements. So it must be easily standardized so that the two units can be compared. It must be easily divisible so that you can make change. It must be easy to carry around, must be physically durable, and there must be a broad demand. So then he gets into, because then again, so this is something that's not, it could be money would be commodity money, but it gets into like cigarettes. So I think that's very interesting comparison. And of course we see that in the movies, like cigarettes in prison, or it talks about cigarettes back when there was prisoners of war in POW camps. That was their money, because you have a pack of cigarettes, everybody wants them, they're divisible, they're easy to carry around, they last, obviously not forever, there's a shelf life for cigarettes, but long enough so that cigarettes became commodity money. And then it talks too about, like in Russia, there was a period of time in that economy where vodka became commodity money. So everybody wants the vodka. Again, you can measure it. You could, give them half the bottle, quarter of the bottle. It's physically durable, lasts for a long period of time. So it met all those things. So as long as both parties want it, kind of anything can become commodity money, as long as, again, it's easily split up, and again, it's easy to it lasts, and it's easy to carry around. Then it talks about cryptocurrencies, which is an interesting topic, because those are getting more and more common, and it's something to think about. That could possibly change our future of money. And I haven't gotten so much into that, but I think that'd be an interesting topic to research. But what it says is that cryptocurrency is the use of the codes that keeps information secret, and they are decentralized, and there's no central banks responsible for overseeing the supply of the cryptocurrency, and there's no government regulations. So the no government regulations is where maybe some of the questionable part comes in, because it could be people using it for illegal use, it could be terrorism. You know what I mean? There's a way to get money to transfer in those cryptocurrencies where there's no money trail. But it is an interesting thought. Okay, then the next section, oh no, that's the last section. Is that true? No, that is not true. Okay, so then the next section talks about money aggregates, and then these are just different abbreviations. So we've got like an M1. So an M1 stands for what people have in cash and what they have in their checking accounts and savings accounts. So like what they have in their just depository information, accounts. Then there is MMMFs, and those are money market and mutual fund accounts. So then it goes beyond just what's in your checking and your savings, but do you have something in a money market account, which would be a little bit more of an investment account, or a mutual fund, which again is you're investing those in a group of stocks or bonds or whatever. So then those are MMMFs. And then there is disintermediation, and that is the removal of funds from a financial intermediary, which is a bank, to invest them directly through a mutual fund. So again, you're taking them out of your savings account and putting them like into the stock market is basically what that disintermediation is referring to. And then M2 is a broader measurement of the money supply that includes your M1, so all of your cash and your accounts in your local bank, so your savings accounts, your money market accounts, then any small deposits that are less than $100,000, and then your shares that you have in any mutual funds, not including your retirement. So then that's, again, a little bit bigger of a savings, but yet still not a super long-term savings. So that's probably why it includes some of those other ones. But those will be ones you'll kind of want to understand what those different things are, because you wouldn't just M1, M2, you're probably going to have to study those to know. Okay, then it talks about the price of money and kind of how that gets into our interest rates. So there is a time value of money, and you would have had time value computations in your business analysis with algebra class, so hopefully that's coming back to everybody. But it talks about the present value and the future value. So the present value talks about the fact that if we borrow money today, we're going to have to pay back more than that in the future. So that's where interest rate comes in, to say that we recognize that if I borrow $1,000 today and I pay it back in 2 years, $1,000 in 2 years isn't the same as $1,000 today due to inflation and the changes of values. So banks charge interest to try to make up that loss of money and to make a little bit of money over time. So then it gets into some of that to just say that basically you're going to owe what you borrowed plus the interest, maybe 10%, 8%, whatever's charged. Then future value talks about the compounding. So again, we had those computations in business analysis with algebra also. And those are where your interest, you deposit money, you earn interest, you leave it in the account. So then now your interest is earning interest, and then that builds, and that's what makes savings account work so well, because you're leaving your money in there, it's growing, and then it's growing even further. So that kind of completes chapter 2, and again, it's just trying to get you to understand kind of the big picture about money and why we need money. So hopefully, again, read your chapter, and then you can move on to your MindTap homework.